Welcome to the Positive Persistence Podcast, where ordinary people inspire your extraordinary success. Hey, what's up, family? My guest today helps leaders strengthen their integrity, resilience, and impact by challenging assumptions and cultivating values-driven leadership. With decades of experience guiding teams in public safety, higher education, and nonprofits, he brings a unique perspective to clients eager to grow, question their beliefs, and lead with purpose. He excels at engaging tough conversations, building trust, and empowering individuals to thrive. And as an ICF Associate Certified Coach, he partners with leaders who want to sharpen their decision-making, elevate effectiveness, and create lasting results for their communities. Doug Babcock, welcome to the show.
Ian, such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now, just to clear the air, Doug, can you tell us what an ICF Associate Certified Coach is?
Anybody can call themselves a coach. Anybody can be a coach. In fact, coaching informally, everyday leaders, I encourage it. Absolutely. There's a federation, though, the ICF, or the International Coaching Federation, which is a governing body which holds professional standards. They require a certain amount of training, a certain amount of understanding about principles and ethics, and then hours of coaching so that you know that when you get an ICF certified coach, that they have not just, said, hey, I'm good at this and I'm going to hang around, but we've studied, we've researched, we've learned procedures, processes, ethics, ways to protect our clients and not just help people, but really support true growth, create safe spaces for experimenting, for learning more, and to demonstrate our competence and our professional dedication to our clients.
So you really have learned different ways to take people where they can't get themselves, which for me, I believe that's like the baseline true definition of a coach. So what we do as coaches.
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely. Yep.
Now, Doug, you've had an incredible career. You've had experience in public safety, from EMT to police officer to crisis leadership coach. And I'm wondering, obviously, since this show is about positive persistence and it's about resilience and about coming back from adversity, how do those experiences in those high stress roles that you've had shape your understanding of resilience and, I guess we'll call, personal power?
That is such a deep question. And I'm going to start by going all the way back. Mm-hmm. One of the most important lessons I ever learned in life truly was a lesson as a kid. I have no idea where it came from, but I know that the way it stayed in my head is there is always a lesson. There's always a lesson. There's a lesson of what to do and what not to do. And all of us remember at some point as a kid, right? Our parents did something and we were like, you're mean and when I have kids, I'm never going to say that to them. Right?
Yeah.
That's an example. Like, we all have these things. I happened to grow up in an environment that had all of the factors for me to go astray. There was abuse, there was substance abuse, there was family violence. I grew up with economic instability. All these tough conditions. And frankly, as the youngest of three boys, and there was another family in the same town that had the same last name, and they were actually more trouble than we were. I'm in these spaces and, known, oh, you're a Babcock. Okay. And there was always a lesson in every time that was said to me. I could either, right, take that and go, yeah, that's right. And bow my ego up and make that decision and prove them right.
Yeah.
Or I could say, I define me, not you. And I will make my choice. And my choice was to prove you wrong. Like, to say, no, I'm not one of those. I am me. And so one of the things I did to do that, to follow on with that, is I chose mentors without knowing that was the word for it. But my oldest brother was, the day he turned 18, he joined the volunteer fire department in town. Started his EMT class 6 months after that. I followed in those footsteps. I started my EMT class when I was 16 years old. I was certified at 17. And by 18, I was running, as a volunteer EMT with the paramedics, covering Paterson, New Jersey, the projects and interstate heroin overdoses and stabbings and car accidents, all these things. All because I chose, I would not let someone else's idea of who I was, who my family was, what my circumstances were define me. I
Yeah.
would choose that myself.
Mm-hmm.
And in a very real way, I chose the hard way. Like it was tough. I saw some terrible things. And as still a child myself, 18, and I had, bad calls with kids and bad calls with, people my age. And it was terrible,
Yeah.
except that I knew that if I'm doing this, if I'm choosing that I'm taking this, or I'm choosing my heart, I'm choosing this, I am not falling into that. And I knew that the road I was choosing, what I was choosing to do, yes, it was difficult. Yes, it led to hard things and things I had to deal with, but I dealt with them because I chose them on my terms. And that was much more empowering than this happened to me. And therefore that is what I am. And
Right.
just getting shuffled off into that direction, getting caught up in the current, the riptide, that frankly, most of my life was dealing with other people who made that choice, right? Who
Yeah.
consciously or unconsciously, no one chooses to self-destruct. Very, very few people choose to self-destruct. Most people don't realize their own agency and they give it up. No one can take it from you, but you can give it up.
Mm-hmm.
And so that became a theme in my understanding of the world. And then as I rose in the ranks and rose in responsibility, I connected with that obligation to pay that forward, to help others understand their power of choice, to help others understand how they can be the light they want in the world, right? To use that phrase, but to
Yeah.
believe in themselves in a meaningful way. Not a poster you put on the wall, not a bumper sticker, not the head bob thing that you do on Facebook when I'm all this and that, but the really mean it, the really core get it, and for the right reasons. That became more and more of my driver as I moved forward. And as I moved up in the ranks, I got to influence more people. It was less about me knocking on the door or picking up the mess one at a time, but more about me helping 5, 10, 100 people learn how to do that, so that every day, 5, 10, 100 people of me, part of me is knocking on the door and picking up that problem. And there's just so much more power when we pay it forward in the world.
Doug, you said some powerful things just now, and I want to retrace your steps here a little bit, and I want to unpack that comment you made that nobody's agency is taken from them, but some people decide to give it up.
Yeah.
So can you give us some examples of that in which you've dealt with that or seen that in your experience?
Yeah, I write about this in my book that's coming out in a couple of months. At some point, as a police detective, I had to deal with death investigations. And at some point, I was in somebody's basement. It was a nice condominium, but this late teenager, I don't remember, 17, 18, something like that, maybe 22, somewhere right in there, and had overdosed and passed away. And there I am with dad, and I'm doing the, yes, it's very sad. I'm sorry for your loss. And I meant it, but I'm also very professional and calculating and kind of cold. And I got to
Yeah.
ask this question: when's the last time I saw him? And I got to, I got to get those details. And to me, when I was done with that, I just moved on. I had to write a report. I had to this, that, the other, and close the books, because just another one. Like, I'm gonna have one next week too. So I just gotta go. And so that was just a thing. That was just Tuesday. But a few weeks later, the actor Philip Seymour Hoffman died of the same thing. He was in a ritzy room in a hotel, fancy hotel in New York, if I remember right, New York City, but he passed away of a heroin overdose. And everyone is understandably so in terms of society, but going, oh, the loss and the tragedy. And I say, I get that, but nobody was doing that for this kid 2 weeks ago. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this guy was in movies and this guy entertained us and he, sang and danced and whatever, but why is he this tragic loss to the world and this kid wasn't? And I couldn't reconcile those two things. So I got angry about them instead. I was angry on both sides and had nothing to work with in between. Life has a way of completing its circle when it in its time. A few weeks after that, a person who I went to the police academy with, he was a sworn police officer. I went to the academy with him. He worked for a neighboring agency and he got arrested on drug and weapons charges. This whole big thing unraveled about all the things that he'd been doing wrong. And he'd gotten addicted to pills after getting injured on the job, and it went south from there. Now I had to sit down because I had skin in this game. Now a human being that matters to me, like now I must reconcile this. And so I spent a long time. I banged every way I could on this. And what I realized is that at some point, every one of us was somebody's little hope and dream. There is a picture of every one of us in second grade with like no front teeth, the little gap tooth smile. Every one of us at some point has that picture, whatever else was going on in the life, the world and at some point, every one of us had woken up in the morning, never having shot anything into our veins. Somebody at some point goes to bed having changed that. And so there's a moment. It didn't happen overnight, but that instant happened that changed everything and you can't go back. Mm-hmm. That's a moment where somebody is giving up their agency. Now, whatever that is in our world, whether it is, literally heroin or pills or snorting, or whether it is engaging in the violent pattern of behavior and response or reaction that we saw from our parents, right? When we're frustrated and now our partner makes us mad. When it is that binge eating response or that I hate myself response that we were taught, that we have as that narrative out there. When we take that in and make that action our own, we are handing over our agency, a part of it, a little bit at a time, sometimes a lot at a time. That's what I mean. We give up that agency that no one can take it from us, but we can go and hand it back and say, I'm not going to hold myself accountable to my own beliefs. I'm going to allow this thing, and away we go. And it does become a slippery slope, and it can be a very fast slippery slope. It almost always leads to harm of some kind or another.
Doug, you said the A word, accountable.
Yeah.
And that brings me back to something you said at the beginning of this conversation. We were talking about your childhood and people expected you to act a certain way.
Yeah.
And, you said something that I talk about a lot, and that is, never let someone else's perception of your capabilities become your reality.
Mm-hmm.
And you chose not to. You chose to be responsible for your own actions when you could have accepted the label that was placed on you, that you were supposed to be a ruffian or a troublemaker or whatever. When life hands us that label, because sometimes it's not people in the town or people in your family, it's just life hands you this perception of yourself that you're not good enough, or that you are supposed to fail, or you're just not lucky, or whatever it is. For you at that young age, what was it that stopped you from accepting other people's perceptions, accepting what life could have potentially been, and choosing this other path, which you said that was the hard route? Like, what made you choose that route instead of going with the flow, basically, and just accepting what everyone else already had pretty much labeled you as?
That's a really fascinating question. And here's the thing that they all have to offer on that is that for me in that moment, it wasn't defined. It wasn't a poster on the wall. It wasn't a leader in particular. It was a drive for me. What I'll say to that, though, is that as I've grown and learned and added more to it, I understand that at some point it was only a spark. And from there, I added intention to it. There was a part of me that just said, that's not who I am. I mean, it could have been any number of influences. I was in scouting and I had some fantastic Boy Scout leaders and folks in my life. I was raised going to church, right? Maybe that had an influence, and the minister. I was raised by parents who, though they had their challenges, were also, human beings, and they allowed me to see that, right? I had good teachers, all of these things. Somewhere along the line, there was something that said, I want to do the morally right thing, or I want to define myself. I was able to add on to that with intention from there. And so I don't think it's that somebody just doesn't have it or does. I think we have that. It's whether we access it. There's an old saying, when someone can't access hope, they live by their fear. It's not that you don't have hope, it's that you can't access it. I believe we all have this drive to do the right thing. And I'm not looking like morally arc of the universe right, but like our right, my truth. But whether we can access it, whether we can add intentionally to it. And I do think circumstances will have a play in that. There was somewhere along the line a mentor that really mattered to me. And if that mentor wasn't there, my life would look differently, and I'm not saying there's a single person and the whole thing unravels, but we do need that access to be able to build, to add, to grow that foundation. I believe we all have that same spark. So whether we can access it between ourselves and externally, the people and surroundings in our environment, we can add and build to it with intention.
What you just said, a quote, I want to share, I wrote it down. So when someone loses hope, they live by fear.
When you can't access
hope, you live by fear.
Yes.
There was another quote that you dropped the last time that we spoke that hit me sideways, and I loved it, so I wrote it down. But you talk about the power of choice.
Yep.
And the idea that no one can go back and make a new yesterday.
Right.
But everyone can start today and make it new tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And I love that. And I was hoping you could unpack that, and how can we use this mindset to move through setbacks instead of getting stuck in regret or self-blame.
And this connects right back to there's always a lesson. The truth is you are in this moment wholly more yourself and everything there is to be about you than you have ever been in your life. For having had this conversation with you, Ian, I'm already richer and better in the world than I was 20 minutes ago before we started talking. I'm constantly adding to my life, my understanding. I'm filtering, I'm connecting, I'm always engaged and growing. And here's the thing. Every choice you have available to you today is based on your decisions yesterday. Whatever options are available, I can do A, I can do B, I can do C. Those are the options you have because of A and B and C that you did choose yesterday and the day before. That may say, hey, there's only this available to you today. My example, I'm really not going to end up walking on the moon. Like, I'm not physically going to get tossed up in a rocket. Odds are, right? I'm not going to end up being one of NASA's astronauts. Mm-hmm. That's a consequence of many decisions I've made along the way. But I can start today and use my options from what I have for options today to build towards the tomorrow that I want. If I can't walk on the moon, but do I want to at least get into space, right? I know that I can get on Blue Origin, right? And take a cruise up there. What does that mean, right? I have to, make enough money to be able to pay Jeff Bezos to fly me, to the stratosphere, right? The choices that I will have tomorrow are based on the choices I make today, the options I have tomorrow. So I've made my mistakes along the way. At no point is my path, the perfect and yellow brick road way of getting here. I have not upheld my values. I have failed marriage, like in the past, like all of these things, but they won't define me as long as I learn the lesson and leverage that intentionally by understanding that what I have here today creates my choices tomorrow. And so that hard lesson I learned, and another one from the book was a time I sent off a strongly worded email. Like, who hasn't thought that was a good idea at some point, right? You get all mad about something and you send off an email and it got forwarded, and hilarity ensues when the person I didn't even know worked for the college is the one that read the email that I was less than my professional self in. I'm better for having made that mistake and learning the lesson than I would have been for not having made that mistake at all. And so how I choose to respond today is better because I made the mistake and I didn't beat myself up over it. I went, wow, okay, got something to learn from that. And I will, and I commit to it. And I leave the guilt and I leave the stress and I leave the shame behind. Brene Brown does some phenomenal work on shame, and there's so much there. It doesn't help us, but we can't hide from the event, from the lesson, right? That's actually shame winning. Just go, okay, yep, that's what happened. I that was rotten. And I will do better because I can choose to. And we move forward with that. And that's where our real power for growth and for that achievement of, our potential comes from. Not from hiding from the past, just owning it for the fact that it is and taking the lesson that it offers so that we can apply it forward.
And you said multiple times in this conversation, it is your choice.
It is.
You choose. Like sometimes you can't choose your circumstance, but you can choose how to respond to it.
Always.
Right. And something I believe from a friend of mine who said this to me in passing is that your circumstances don't change your responsibility. And that responsibility is you making the choices to be the best version of you possible. So like you said, the choices that we make today affect who we are tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And your circumstances, good or bad, do not change your responsibility to yourself to be the best that you can be.
In a very similar vein, rephrasing it slightly, we have the power of choice. We have the power to not choose, but we do not have the power to avoid the consequence of either our choice or not choosing.
Right.
I'm a huge Rush fan. So, Neil Peart once wrote, if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. And we can't escape that consequence. And that's the thing that people think, like, there's this thought experiment called the trolley problem. Have you ever heard of that? So the scenario is there's a train heading down the tracks and there's 5 people tied up on the tracks and they can't escape and you can't free them and the train is going to run them all over. You are close to a switch and you can switch the train onto another track. On that track, there is one person that is tied up and they cannot get off and you cannot save them and the train will run them over. Do you take the action of switching the train, causing directly through your action one person to be run over, but saving 5? Or do you choose your inaction and let whatever happens because it wasn't your responsibility, you didn't take the action? This is when we have a question of courage in the moment. Do I speak up? When we have a question of right versus wrong, that whatever our moral or ethical belief is, this is that question. Do I risk something of myself, but be accountable for doing the greater good? The thing I say I value, the thing I probably do value, but doesn't mean enough to me. I'll put myself out there and take the direct action. Or do I stand by and go, and let the train roll down the track?
That's a tough question.
When you look in the world, it comes up a lot more often than you'd think, actually.
Yeah, I think, that speaks so highly to like morality and the own standard that you set for yourself.
Yeah.
Right. That is an interesting question. I want to dig into something else a little bit here, and that is emotional intelligence, because I know that's something that you also talk about, and the difference between emotional intelligence and just managing emotions. What is the difference between the two? It's time to ask yourself, when was the last time you prioritized you? Did you know that research shows that nearly 85% of high performers struggle to maintain a performance mindset while juggling the demands of work and personal life? Those who actively prioritize their performance mindset and personal growth are 30% more likely to achieve their goals in business and life. If you're feeling crippling stress and anxiety, or if you're feeling guilty when you take a moment for yourself, or if you're stuck in the grind and feeling burnt out, you're not alone. Many of us yearn for more, but struggle with the fear of being judged or feeling selfish. And you want to step into the next best version of yourself. That's why I created the Rinse Method, which got me from paraplegic to marathon runner. Backed by science-based proven strategies and now customized for high performers like you. If you're stuck and stressed and want clear steps that you can implement today to move forward, make sure you visit thepositivepersistence.com to download our free Rinse PDF.
Emotional intelligence is 4 basic pillars: self-awareness, self-management, and then social awareness and social management, and they build on each other. We can have self-control in our emotions, meaning I don't have an outburst. I walk away. I'm silent. I don't say that comment. That can be self-control.
Mhm.
But if we are not aware of what's happening inside us, if we're not connecting that the reason I feel this, like, hey, physically, what's happening in my body, right? When I'm doing this, when I'm tense, like, I realize my blood pressure is up, my pulse rate is up, right? I'm getting red in the face. I realize I'm clenching my hands. Those are awareness things. And then
Mhm.
why? Did this offend me? Did this upset me? Am I scared? Is this a sore spot, emotionally? Like, what triggered or what caused that reaction in me? If we're not aware of those things, we can control, we can contain, we can box things in for a period of time, right? But this is the bury enough boxes until the pressure mounts and then they blow up kind of thing if you don't have a way of navigating them. We often look for ways to deal with all the things we just wrestled into control through other habits, numbing habits, video games, alcohol, exercise that's, not joy driven or purpose driven exercise. Worse behaviors, misogyny and cheating and all those things, like, can come from this if we're not aware. And that's the difference. There's self-control, and in the moment, sometimes we have to. There's just, don't blow up at the 3-year-old for doing something that's entirely 3-year-old, right? Even, I just had an example. Somebody said, their 3-year-old had at one point grabbed a permanent marker and basically colored on every single wall on the house. But because they had just had a really positive coloring experience and wanted to share it and didn't realize the difference between, a permanent Sharpie. You don't blow up and lose your mind at a 3-year-old for that, right? You control that. But if all you're doing is control and then you don't address it, you don't acknowledge it, it's just waiting there. It's still just waiting there for its chance to pop off. Emotional intelligence instead of emotional control is, why am I feeling? What am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? And how do I manage this so that I release that energy, I connect to the lesson, but I move forward in a way that is intentional, how I want to manage myself. When we're able to do those two things, then we're actually able to connect with others. When I do the self-control and I block myself up, I cannot also be paying attention to you and reading your cues because I'm too inwardly focused to be able to see that whatever your response is, you're like, wow, he's really mad. And I don't know, maybe was that me? And I'm not going to step. And all of a sudden you're walking on eggshells, or your confidence was shaken by this thing because you realized that it went sideways, but you don't know why. And then you're like, well, what happened? What happened? What happened? What happened? And now you do start pushing my buttons, right? If I'm aware of what's going on and how to navigate and manage my emotions, then I can still be connected to my awareness of you and help you manage and navigate that situation so that it doesn't turn into us both having problems, and it doesn't turn into me losing control. If I'm the leader of a situation, me losing control of what's going on out here because I'm having to just struggle so hard for control of myself that I become detached. And that's really the difference between having and staying in a space of emotional intelligence and just being emotionally controlled in the moment.
Sounds like it's really a priority to have emotional intelligence if you're going to navigate a personal or professional crisis
Yeah.
effectively. Like, you
Yeah.
need to have emotional intelligence to be, as you said, aware of the situation, of how you're feeling, your emotions, and also everyone else's, so you can navigate that crisis effectively.
Yeah. In fact, in emergency medicine, we have a saying, when in a crisis, check your own pulse first. And this was just literally true. Like a new EMT or inexperienced EMT, and they come up
Mhm.
on a person that has no pulse, right? They're in cardiac arrest, and oh my god, blah, 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 and they just sing, and you're useless. In that space is, hey, look, they're dead, not me. Like, it's not my crisis. It's just my job, right? It's their crisis. Me, I still have a pulse. I'm still breathing. Air goes in and out, blood goes round and round. Everything else we can deal with.
Mhm.
If we lose sight of that, how can we stick to our values? How can we pick good priorities? How can we make others feel supported, connected, ease their fear, access their hope, right? If we aren't able to do that ourselves. So absolutely, the foundation of crisis management, crisis leadership is absolutely check your own pulse first.
That makes so much sense. Let's talk leadership, because I know that you've mentioned that value-based leadership is a core part of your coaching.
Yeah.
How does leading with your values inside and outside of work, let's say, help create consistency and also resilience in life and in your profession?
This is so fascinating because one of the things, and I do this with almost all of my clients right early on, is there's an exercise in identifying values. And in fact, it's available on my website. You can download it and do it for free. We often say, this is what matters to me. I care about this. I care about this. I care about this. Absolutely. And I believe that, and that's absolutely true. And this is not a but, and this is not an either or, but it's an and. I can say I value this now, but later in this other circumstance, I can value that more. And that can be because of pressure. That can be because of, yes, quality is job one. We have to get this done right now. You have an hour to finish this. Okay, I'll finish it. Right. I've just got it. Like all of a sudden, the urgency becomes my greater value. Right. And so quality, I say that matters, but here we are, me writing out a bunch of slop just to get it done. And so especially if we don't do the exercise of actually understanding our values and then seeing how we live them. And so the exercise I do with people, here's a list of, 100, 120 values. Add your own, whatever you want, but list them out. If every other thing in the world was not an option, what's the one thing you would say, I will start here and rebuild everything in my life, right? And that can be, and I don't care what it is for you, right? That can be family economics, family stability, economic stability. For my personal is integrity. And by that, I mean, not just integrity, telling the truth, but like a bridge has integrity. Any gap anywhere in the bridge and the whole thing can come down. So continuous, whole, consistent. I do everything I can to have that, like that thread of my character all the way through. And then when I come to a moment and I'm like, wow, like I am loyal to this person. I respect this person, but they're going to a place that my integrity doesn't allow. Right? I can't follow that. And I've worked with for challenging bosses before. I've had some negative workplace environments. I can sit there and go like, I'll keep my head down. I can just do my job over here. And I do until the point when, oh no, I can't ignore that. Right? That is too much. And then I have to stand on that value and say, this other stuff is worth losing. This is worth taking the hit over because this is the thing that matters more. When we're in a leadership position, people say like, I care about my people. I'm here, I'm right. We hear the servant leader, right? We hear lead from the front, leaders eat last, all of those things. Do you do that? What does that mean in the moment? This is an example from the recent media. The Tennessee School Board. Do you remember anything about this from about March or so of 2026? Or there's a school board in Tennessee where there's a student that's a female student that's a member of the school board. So it's about, I think she was about 16 years old. And she gives a report to the school board. She's there every school board meeting. She's got a seat. She's at the table, her little name tag, and says, this is what's going on. And when she finishes her report, one of the elected adult members of the school board, a man who's 59 years old sitting next to her, says, God, you're hot, and puts his arm around her shoulders and pulls her in for a hug. And says, where do you go to school? And absolutely no one in the room says anything at all. No one, not the school board chair, not another member of the school board, no one in the audience. This 16-year-old girl has to kind of giggle and titter and say what school she goes to. And eventually just a school board chair just picks up with, okay, next item on the agenda. And then later it goes viral and causes all sorts of, commotion and news channels come down. And the school board members are, I was very concerned when he said that. And here's my question. Then why didn't you say something in the moment? Because that is leadership. I'm sure absolutely every one of those members of the school board, including the man that said that, would tell you one of his values is protecting students, right? Providing a safe environment for students. I am here to care for, serve, protect the students. I want what's best. Every one of them would have said that, but did they live it? Did they know that was the moment they were being tested? If we don't understand our values, if we are not putting intentionality into knowing who we are and what we stand for, that moment can happen and pass us by. And that's a trolley problem. That's how those two things connect. And so leaning into understanding our values as leaders allows us to be present in the moment when it matters and when it matters the most.
Whether we need to stick up for somebody else or stick up for ourselves.
100%.
And I think what you just said is really important for us sometimes, that we need to actually stand up inside ourselves.
Yes.
And stick up for ourselves and not allow the prevailing wisdom of negativity sometimes to win that battle.
Right.
And have that value of choosing, there's that choice word again, to do the right thing to move ourselves forward. And I think that is a huge part of resilience, and is a huge part of allowing ourselves to actually tap into the true potential that we have, so we can move forward to reach whatever goal that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, Doug, I want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about your book that's coming out very soon. Give us the title and what is the book about?
This is funny. I just had a meeting this morning and I thought we had the title all set, but they want me to tweak it a little bit. The working title has been Learn What Doesn't Matter. And ultimately, it's going to be something around that. The point is that there's all these processes inside us, narratives and information and ideas that really aren't serving us. And actually, I'll tell the story that that title comes from, because this is like really key to all of these things, the self-awareness and the management. The title comes from when my grandmother died back in 2000, and I'd just gotten out of the Coast Guard. I moved back here with my young family. My oldest daughter was only about 6 years old, and we're at the funeral, and it's at the little Craftsbury Common Church in Craftsbury, Vermont, little tiny, little spot where my grandfather had been the pastor. And there's this picture that got taken of me and my daughter right when I was scolding her to not get her dress grass stained. She's, wearing this cute little pink, skirt and pink outfit, this, that, the other. And you can tell from the look on my face and the look on hers that I'm giving her a little bit of what for, because here she is, she's running around in the grass, and we're at this funeral, and all these people are formal dressed, and my grandmother, and it was a somber occasion.
Yeah.
What I didn't understand was she is 6, had never met my grandmother. For the first time in over a year, getting to play with her cousins. Right. We are not saving this dress for 5 years. She had a little sister at this point. We weren't going to save this dress for 5 years. The standards that my grandmother would or wouldn't have approved of were 90 years old and died with her, and were formed from the 1880s because her parents gave her those standards. Right. And here I am enforcing this, don't get the grass stained and respect and funeral for a person who is not there. And I'm sucking the joy out of the person who is there in this moment. Looking at that picture, I didn't understand it in the moment, but over the years, as that picture popped back up, and I was like, wait, what the? And I looked at it, and I was shocked to see who was in that photo, because it wasn't me. It wasn't me in that moment that I'm looking at it going, I don't know who that guy is anymore. I go through the book, through stories about, some stories from the street, a lot of stories from the street, EMS calls, police calls, wild and crazy things I've done, but also my time in St. Mike's, my time as a parent, and I connect them with emotional intelligence, those same 4 pillars: self-awareness and management, social awareness and management. Some other quotes, you caught me. I do drop a lot of quotes. I love succinct ways of wrapping our head around powerful ideas. And in the end, the point is for this whole process to increase our self-awareness of what we have inside us so that we can choose more intentionally which parts of those we use. There is a place for saying, hey, don't get that grass stained. There's a place for it. Like rent a tuxedo to go to a fancy wedding. Don't play flag football in it, right? You'll cost your deposit. Or
Right.
recognize, yeah, it'll just be worth paying for the paying to buy a tuxedo, right? Make that choice intentionally rather than just follow the pattern. And this, I think, is something that connects to what what I know of your story. Follow the pattern. Ian, this is what the rest of your life is going to be like. You're going to X and Y and Z, right?
Mhm.
And that could have been just swallowed and gone, okay. And instead, what I understand of you, you chose and you chose a hard path, but you chose your agency, you chose your intentionality. And you said, I'm going to learn enough about myself to learn how to not be what you're putting on me. And that's ultimately the lesson in this book. So the target publication is mid-September. I'll be very, very happy to share the link once everything is finalized. I'll send it back to you and maybe you can update the show notes at that point. But ultimately, whatever the title ends up officially being, the spirit of this is learn what doesn't matter.
That is a lesson that I'm still learning, and I wish I would have started to begin to learn years ago with my kids. And it's something that my wife, I'm also a divorcee. My wife now is teaching me with my stepsons
Mm-hmm.
and with my kids from my first marriage of learning, like picking your battles and, learning what doesn't matter. Because like you, I am enforcing rules and narratives that I was brought up with, that my father was brought up with, which were very stringent and from a different time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are, when you were talking about that, looking at that picture and saying that you were sucking the joy out of that moment for the person who's living
Mm-hmm.
from lessons you learn from someone who's no longer there. Man, that just so many instances of my own life came back to me in a flash. And, learning what doesn't matter is super important. With that being said, Doug, I want to thank you so much for joining us on this episode. And there's so many pearls of wisdom that you dropped in this conversation.
Thank you.
I want to allow our listeners and viewers to know where to find out more about you. Where can they find you on social media, your website, so they can find out more about your work, more about your coaching, and eventually more about that book when it's ready to drop.
So the website is counterpartscoaching.com, just all one word. I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook with both company pages and personal pages. I've got a picture of this shining, smiling face as the profile picture for those. I'm actually developing, and I don't want to take too long, but I'm working on a network called Insight to Impact Leaders.com.
Okay.
That website's not up yet, but it will be within a couple of weeks. And it's a monthly opportunity to have conversations like this. We'll take that one pearl of wisdom. You have the power to choose, but not the power to avoid the consequence of your choice. We'll walk through a structure I've developed for how to take it from an abstract idea and turn it into something impactful in your life. And that's the Insight to Impact journey. And then the second half of those meetings is going to be an opportunity for people who are present to bring forward, hey, this is a challenge I'm facing, and have the hive mind work through that structure to help gain clarity and move. So it's a little bit of a group coaching hive mind process thing. So that's going to be insight to impactleaders.com. Like I said, I'm already at counterpartscoaching.com, which is, I'll have a page for the book on that. And then, LinkedIn, and I haven't gotten into the TikTok and Instagram thing yet. So maybe down the road, but LinkedIn and Facebook, and I'm happy to connect with folks. I'm also available on Every Expert. That's a new website that's up and coming, a new source. And I'm happy to book a half hour, just chat. Anybody wants to just questions, bounce ideas around. I'd love good conversations. So I'm here for you. Absolutely.
Well, Doug, thank you again so much for your time this morning. And I want to thank all of our listeners and viewers for tuning in. And we'll end it like we always do. Remember, stay positive, stay persistent, and remember, mindset is everything. We'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in and being part of the Positive Persistence family. We're having a great time creating this content, and we truly hope it inspires you to embrace positivity and persistence in your own journey. If this podcast episode inspired you or entertained you, scroll down, hit those stars, and leave a comment or two. Your 5-star reviews and shares encourage us and help us grow the show. So until next time, stay positive, stay persistent, and remember, mindset is everything.